Hello, everybody. This is Nick Totiro, Professor of Information Technologies and Computer Science, Lakeland Community College. Okay, let's talk about footprinting. Basically, footprinting is the process of gathering intelligence, gathering information. Not quite gathering data, that's a little bit different, but gathering intelligence about our potential victim. If we're doing pen testing, legitimate pen testing, it's the organization that has hired us, that has given us all the permissions to look into the particular weaknesses. Before we get into some of the details of footprinting, remember in other videos, other class discussions, I've used the phrase, if I can touch it, I can own it, right? If I can physically touch it, I can own it. And we use that concept a lot in fingerprinting. Now, years ago, physically touching a system may be connecting in through a modem, maybe literally breaking into the building. Now, most systems are connected to the internet, most networks. So that's the first place we're going to go. This video is going to concentrate on footprinting using domain name systems, or DNS. So let's go to my screen and we'll do a quick recap of DNS from other courses and general knowledge, and we can understand the information. I'm not going to call it data, but information that we're going to gather from footprinting our DNS. All right, this is probably one of the best images I've ever seen of how DNS works. A quick little recap. Here I am sitting at this device over here. And on this device over here, I do a lookup. I say, I want to go to beta.example.com. I'm going to touch a local DNS server. Now that could be local to my house, to my organization. It might be my internet provider's DNS, but I'm going to hit a DNS server. This is what they referred to as a non-authoritative DNS server, meaning it probably does not have the zone records, the database for the information that I'm looking at. It's not authoritative. But between these two, between the client and this first server, I'll use the phrase obligation. This DNS server is now obligated to either return me the address that I'm looking for, or try its hardest, can't find it, and return, nope, can't find it. So there is an obligation here to return either an address or I've given you my best and I still can't find it. So this DNS server, non-authoritative, meaning it doesn't have the zone file in it. Zone files become important in pen testing. It's going to go to a root DNS server, those infamous root DNS servers up there on the internet, 13 of them. And it's going to basically say, can you tell me where this given server is? Can you tell me where, in this example, beta.example.com is? This root server, no way it's going to have it. The root server just kind of is going to say, no, I don't know. But since it's a .com, I know a top-level DNS server that may have that information for you. The connection between this local DNS server and this root DNS server, there's no obligation. There's no obligation to return anything. It doesn't have to try. So it's going to say, I don't know, but why don't you go here? So then it goes to this top level domain and it says, hey, can you tell me who beta.example.com? And this top level.com domain says, no, I don't know who beta.example.com are, but I know who example.com are. So it's going to send back the DNS address back to this server with the DNS address, the DNS server address of example.com. And again, now we go to this server. Now this server is a little bit different. This server is an authoritative server. That's where those zone files may reside, or at least zone files for the database files for the DNS for the example.com DNS zone resides. It's an authoritative. It controls those zones. And it says, hey, can you tell me the address of beta.example.com? It may have the address, but it's going to say, I don't particularly have the address, but I have the address of somebody that might have the address. So again, it goes back, it sends back, no, try this address. Finally, the server hits this beta.example.com server. Again, it's beta.example is just another zone. It says, yeah, I happen to have that address. Fine. It returns the address back to this local DNS server. Remember, these were under no obligation. This was under no obligation. If it couldn't find it here, say you mistyped it, you spelled the name wrong or something like that, it's still going to go through these processes here to the point where it says, no, nobody has that. The moment it either has a valid address or it has a situation where there is no valid address, the obligation is now fulfilled. And it goes back and says, here is the address, what you are looking for. So a real quick recap of how DNS works. DNS is distributed across the internet. There's no big one giant DNS server, even though people think there is with these root servers. No, the root servers just pass along who might have it. They don't have every single DNS address out there. The other thing is these are the public DNS servers. These are the DNS servers that are on the public side of most people's firewalls. Behind the firewalls, you'd have your private DNS servers. You can imagine, for example, Lakeland Community College, which I'll use an example in this video. We have hundreds of computers behind our firewalls with names and things like that to it. We don't want the world to see that. We don't want the world to see our private DNS, but obviously we want the world to see IP addresses for www.lakelandcc.edu or our mail server and stuff like that. So we're not even looking at the private side because that's behind those firewalls. We are looking at the public side, the information that is readily available to the public, right? So quick little recap about DNS. Now, I'm going to go to my Kali Linux machine. The commands I'm going to use are native to Kali Linux, meaning they are built into Kali Linux. I'm going to move my head over to here. They're commands that are native to Kali Linux, so I don't have to install them. Most of these commands that I'm going to demonstrate, you can install in Windows. They do have Windows version of it, but I didn't want to install them on my machine and stuff like that. So you'll see me doing a lot of demonstrations with Kali Linux. Alrighty. Friendly warning. Now we're at the point where we are still safe, meaning we can do this stuff. The information that we're going to be gathering is fundamentally publicly available information. Later on, throughout the semester or whatever, we may be crossing a line where we can't do it. We can't do it to live machines or machines that are in the wild. So the stuff I'm going to be doing now, the information gathering, the intelligence gathering, I'm just gathering publicly available information. I think that's important here. So we're going to look up information about Lakeland Community College, right? We want to gather information. We want to maybe get an IP address of the web server, the IP address of the domain, maybe a contact name or two, and we're gonna work upon that. One of the first commands we can use is the nslookup, and if I just type activate my screen. If I type nslookup lakelandcc.edu, you can see I already did it. When I was practicing here, give it a second, and it says server address 192.168.1.1. That's probably on the other side of the server, but more importantly, right here. Right there, this information right here, I'll highlight it real quickly. That is the DNS server for Lakeland. There's a couple pieces of information there. One is, it does say the domain lakelandcc.edu. It's a DNS server. It's at the address 208.68.195.248. I start marking this down. I keep my little journal. I write this down, document. But I also know it's a non-authoritative server, meaning that if I inquire to that DNS server, the zone files aren't there. right? The zone files are probably behind the firewall. And I'll talk briefly about that as we go through this, but the initial lookup of just finding Lakeland information is at this non-authoritative server. Remember, I don't want, or Lakeland or anybody doesn't want the outside world to be aware of what is behind the firewall. So we see these non-authoritative servers. If somehow we get around the firewall and we start seeing the DNS server, that's a different animal. Right now, we're on the public side of the internet. There's some other tools. Dig is another one. I think the book or books do mention. Gives me a little bit more information, but again, we still see, this is the DNS server, et cetera, some cookie information. It gets into a little bit more stuff, right? And again, we would document this. Some of this stuff is pertinent. Other information is not so important. We'll get into pertinent information or information gathering. I'm going to go to a website, and the website is Who.is. And what this website does is allows me to look up publicly available DNS information about an organization. Now, in this video, you might see, or you will see, my cursor is just running horribly slow here. It says your IP address, something. I'm going to black that out. I don't want you guys to see that, because what that is my router's address. My home, I'm sitting at home, my home router, I have my private network, and it's a 192.168 network, but then there's the public side or the internet side of my router. That is the IP address for the internet side of my router. And if I made that address available, and that's randomly assigned every time I reboot the router, but if I was to make that IP address aware, you or anybody can basically look up where I'm physically located, right? If I click on it right now, it'd give me pertinent information, and I don't want my pertinent information, my router's information in this video. So you'll see that blacked out. But I'm going to put here, I'm going to put Lakeland. My machine's run a little slow, and I apologize. cc.edu. So on the internet, when you register your DNS name, when you purchase a DNS domain name, you have to provide it certain pieces of information. You have to provide it, obviously the domain, you have to provide it the IP address that domain is going to be residing at. You have to provide it who's going to be managing your DNS server. You have to provide the individual contact information, the person who is responsible for your DNS structure. Now, there is a great piece of information we can work with. The person is somebody that I could either contact, I can try social engineering, or I can try phishing expeditions. Chances are the person that's going to be identified probably is not going to be like an administrator. It's not going to be a president of the organization or vice president. It's going to be a technician. Right? And I don't mean that disparagingly. It's going to be somebody that's in the IT department. So I'm going to say lakelandcc.edu. I'm going to say search away. Search away. Now, it's not really searching. It's not going out to Lakeland's website. It's going to, I think it's the ICANN database, and says, give me the pertinent information that is on record for lakelandcc.edu. And here's the registration data. And if we scroll, it says, scroll a little bit more. I do apologize. All right, let's read this first of all. The registration contains only .edu domains. That's good. That's a top-level domain. The data in the EduCause is the organization that is basically maintaining this information. Remember, this is the public side. The EduCause Who.is database is the authoritative for the .edu domain. It's that it's not the top level domain. That's those root domains. It is the top level domains like .com, .edu. EduCause is that top level after the root. And now we get into pertinent information or specific information associated with Lakeland. I'm sorry here. We're going to start with its address and a phone number, right? There's the address. And what this address is if somebody has issues with the DNS structure or questions about Lakeland's DNS, this is the address that they contact. Now, notice a couple things here, and I always apologize to David here, but David is one of our, D. Levine is our one of our technical people in the IT thing. That's his contact information, right? It is readily available, so I'm not too afraid of people knowing it. But that is, if there's a problem with DNS, there it is. Now, down here, we see the name servers. Those are the DNS servers in which this information actually resides. If you remember the graphics, at one point it says, who has the address? This is the address of the DNS servers. Those DNS servers, those are not the authoritative servers in this regard. They just maintain some particular records, a handful of records that are associated with Lakeland so the outside world can contact Lakeland. So we have a bunch of information here, believe it or not. We have a contact information, we have a contact phone number, contact email address, we have who the name servers are, we even have activation dates when this domain came into being. We begin to document this, and later on, and we'll talk about this through semesters and other videos, we can use this information for social engineering, for additional gathering of information. But this is some very important information in which intelligence, in which I begin to start thinking, how can I make headroads into Lakeland? I now have a contact name. Maybe I can go phishing. Maybe I can send a phishing email to everybody saying, hey, it's David from blah, blah, blah. This is blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've gathered some information. We did some initial footprinting. In subsequent videos, we will use this information to gather more information. So we started with just DNS, publicly available information, and I was able to find Lakeland's Lakeland's IP address. I was able to find out who Lakeland basically works with for DNS services. More important, I found out who at Lakeland is responsible for DNS. That might be a very important person. That's not the president of the college or the vice president of the college, but that might be somebody around campus that people know. Oh, he's the person that deals with the DNS. So there was a great deal of information, I thought, and this is just the beginning of this footprinting process. Now, that being said, let's go and learn something.